This week on The Futurists, Michael Casey.
Innovation happens, necessity is the mother of invention, right? And so if we're all going to end up in Skynet, then there's a necessity to do something. I figure we can work it out. Otherwise we're extinct, So come on, what are we going to do?
Welcome back. I'm Brett King, your host, and joining me in the hot seat this week is my good pal, Michael J. Casey. He's worked with us for actually it must be close to a decade now, Michael, is it?
Wow, come on, really? Gee,
it was. It was 2014. We did exponential finance together in New York, and then you came on as our Bitcoin correspondent for Breaking Banks. Do you
Bitcoin correspondent, that's right. I love that title. Breaking Banks Bitcoin correspondent.
Yeah, it was. Yes, yeah.
It's a great title. I like that one.
Absolutely. For those that don't know you, of course, you've done work with MIT Media Lab. You've been a journalist, written for the Wall Street Journal and others. Right. You ran the Consensus conference, and of course worked with CoinDesk extensively. And you've just you're now building this entirely new Decentralized AI Society, DAIS, which we definitely want to get into. But for those that aren't totally familiar with it, where are you based and what do you spend most of your time doing these days?
Right. Well, I'm based in the New York area, not far from where you used to be. I'm in Pelham and Westchester. I've been here ever since we met, which is like before that. I was, in fact, 2009. And I am, yes, very much focused these days on DAIS, the Decentralized AI Society. That's the thing that's caught my attention. I left CoinDesk in March, around the same time that I published a book, and CoinDesk had a new owner, and things kind of just went different ways, and I ended up launching into this DAI concept that I think is really just one of the most important I've ever been involved in. And that's getting a lot of attention. So doing a lot of traveling like you, I'm weirdly off to Bangkok next week for DevCon, the big
can't believe I'm going to miss you in Bangkok while you're there. I'm going to be
you're in Europe or somewhere. So
I'm in Milan. Yeah.
And I go home to I've got a ridiculous travel schedule. I've got to go to Miami. I'm advising a company called Proppy. That's this wonderful. Finally, they're getting on-chain real estate figured out, which is something it was one of the things that drew me first into the space. The idea that we could get property deeds on chain, and Proppy have figured it out brilliantly. So I'm helping them with their conference on Thursday, the Proppy Summit in Miami. But then I get on a flight and I go to Perth, my hometown, for my 40th school reunion.
Oh, mine's next year.
There you go. So that gets done. And then the next day I fly to Bangkok, where I'm involved in a series of events in and outside of DevCon. And then on Wednesday, I fly to Seoul, Korea for the Upbit conference because I'm speaking there. So yeah, the speaking circuit is driving me all over the place at the moment. That's going to be I'm looking forward to being able to put my feet up at the end of that.
I mean, it's not a bad thing. I think, for me at least, getting back on the road, it's taken a while to recover from the COVID days, and also people reset budgets around virtual events and things like that, so it's tougher. But it is sort of. But I think it is starting to sort of reconfigure. And this adaptation sort of push, which is really keen. So, the decentralized AI thing. Let's talk about that. But you've come from a DeFi world. It's interesting. I've never heard anyone sort of talk about DAI, right? In the way we would talk about DeFi.
Nascent thing. Yeah.
No, I like it. But where, obviously if you're going to have DeFi and you're going to make smart DeFi, smart contracts and things like that are going to be AI based. There's a lot of effort and thinking going into sort of smart contract development right now. Stable coins are sort of firing and there's a lot of interest in that. But obviously you're going to need artificial intelligence to run smart contracts. Why do you need decentralized artificial intelligence? Is it the same as OpenAI, DAI?
Yeah, so I think that if you talk about the intersection of AI and DeFi, you're coming at it more from the role of blockchain and crypto solutions. Flip that around. AI solutions for blockchain and crypto, right? So there's the idea that AI can be used to write smart contracts, as you said. There is this idea that you'll have these agents that are out there trading for you, and that a variety of functions, including software development, could be brought to bear inside the blockchain community and ecosystem with AI. Decentralized AI really is about the opposite. It's about taking all of the inputs and the infrastructure that builds AI itself and putting it into a decentralized environment. Now, it's not an easy thing to do because blockchains are, as we know, inefficient and dispersed and distributed. But it brings with that enormous possibilities to address some of the huge concerns that many of us have about AI, right? The idea that the models, and most importantly, the actual economic structure underpinning it, the very idea that AI could be owned by just 6 big platforms,
Right.
is something that we know is a fairly dangerous state of affairs given what we lived through with Web 2. So we take Web 2 and all of that concentrated control, and the book that I wrote by Frank McCourt, called Our Biggest Fight, really details the challenges that has posed for society, the abuses, the loss of control, the dopamine-driven strategies, all of that stuff. And it takes it into the AI world and puts it on steroids. So we really need to decentralize. I just 100% believe this. And yes, there are big challenges to get there. There are engineering challenges, capital challenges, a variety of other challenges, and we need to figure out how to unlock those, because there's a lot of people building in this space. It's a nascent organization, but there are just countless people doing decentralized compute and decentralized agents and decentralized data provenance solutions so that we know where our data has come from and going to and coming out of an AI model. A range of different pieces that fit together and form what I'm calling the decentralized AI economy.
There's a lot to unpack there. I mean, just even get to the basics of, the underpinning models behind AI, LLMs, LQMs, and so forth, GANs, RANs, CNNs, whatever. As we're talking about that, how do you build a large model for backward propagation and weighting on a blockchain, given, the challenges with transactional throughput and all of those sort of things?
Yeah. No, that's a very good question, but it's also like one of those questions that people who are smart and have alternative ways of looking at things are eager to address, because in some respects it's a loaded question. I don't mean that to be disparaging, Brett, but to say on a blockchain is in itself like, okay, is everything going to be on the blockchain? No, not necessarily. So how do you get around the latency and sort of computational problems that a blockchain possess, but still have all the benefits of it, right? So it is actually, I think, the intersection of blockchain solutions in part, in terms of like keeping a log of aspects of the data, for example.
Right.
It's also, but it may be that really the most important, powerful things are things like computational compute, which may not have to be as computationally intensive as it currently is in things like zero knowledge proofs and homomorphic encryption, but rather using secure enclave computing so that the devices themselves can be. So you can find ways to sort of take a lot of that stuff off chain, and where you need to, you bring data recognition and input recognition into a decentralized environment, and then you can start to think about, like, do we even need large, the word large, language models as a foundational structure?
Or
right?
we could do multimodal approach where...
Multimodal, right. Yeah. And then they're doing the compute in a parallel way, right? So some parts of it done elsewhere and here, and then you build these modules. And so, I find, and I've sort of learned from Jake Bruckman, who's I think been one of the leading people in the venture space speaking about this from Coin Fund, that what you find when you have these conversations with a lot of people who are deeply embedded into the current economics of AI, and some of it could be self-serving, but I think it's also just that they don't have a way of thinking any differently. They'll just say that's impossible, and they'll say that's impossible because there's this essentially a flywheel between NVIDIA's chips, Amazon's storage capacity, OpenAI's and Facebook's foundational models, and they're all built to each other. and they you have to do this, you have to do this. So
Self-reinforcing. Yeah.
right, it's self-reinforcing. It's this, I think this is okay. I'm not an engineer, but I am actually able to understand narratives and the traps of thinking and the politics and the economics that drive a lot of these misplaced. Throughout history, as you would know, as a futurist, therefore you're as much a historian as you are a futurist.
A pastist,
you've seen
yes.
a pastist, yes. You've seen how this is the only way you can do things suddenly gets broken by somebody who does something radically different. And I just think like in AI, the future gets sped up so fast that we're already looking. You could already argue that the LLMs are dinosaurs, right? You could make the case that what ChatGPT was 3 years ago is a ridiculously outdated concept. And so I don't know. I think that's the point. But the thing is, to actually achieve that, it is going to need some engineering breakthroughs. It is going to need more capital. It's going to need all these other things. And let's unlock all that innovation to be able to do so.
Well, the other element that you've really honed in on, which I think is going to be increasingly important, is if we're having all of these IP fights and arguments, and obviously I want to get into your book as well in a moment, but over who gets the right to use that data, and how much of your data, when it's put into an AI model, when does it no longer become reflective of your intellectual property, for example? Now, as part of that, being able to know where the data came from that then has led to this model that's exhibited means that we would have to shift from a view of data privacy and protection, which is sort of the European GDPR frameworks and so forth, to something more of data ownership and then that traceability, which would seem to imply that we need something like blockchain, auditability, to be able to track where that original data source is and how that goes into the weightings of these algorithms. Is that sort of
100%?
Like I
think it's 100%. Like, so I'm actually involved in some projects that are trying to really advance the idea of data ownership as a principle, and possibly working with some folks in Bermuda around some pilots that would do with DNA data, right? So that, because now DNA data is essentially digital data. It's the same. Right. It's just a form of digital data, right? But it's very sensitive. It's extremely important that it be treated with legally and with sort of compliance with all the demands that come with that. And the only way really
do you really want your kids' DNA on a public blockchain, right?
Yeah, of course you don't, right? But that's not what something that is delivered in a provably computationally confidential manner would be. It would not be your kids' DNA. It would be valuable data and insights that can only be understood in a vast mass computational structure as being valuable. But then by creating this secure channels between whatever data outputs you're coming and the individual for whom it's coming, so you could actually design valuable treatments that are tailored to that person's DNA without the system knowing it, right? This is the power of cryptography and zero knowledge proofs and a variety of other mechanisms that you can bring to bear here. So that we don't need to think about it in those terms anymore. You're not putting your DNA on a public blockchain. You're putting, you're using the blockchain to create secure assets so that there's that information can be represented as, say, an NFT. But you're not like putting all the information about it out for everyone to see. But I think that like the reason why I'm raising this is because, to your point about things like GDPR and everything else, if you're going to be operating on this model, and this is where people say that AI is going, that our medical AI is going to be all about tailored solutions for the individual. How are you going to do that? How are you going to be able to have that? Here's my data, and I want you to come back to me with something for me, unless you have created some structure of ownership and some way to trace that ownership. So you need to trace not only based, by the way, where it has come from, you need to prove that you have the permissions. So those permissions are things that will often have time bound. 90 days. You've got 90 days to work with it, and then it comes back to me. We're exploring the idea that you could create financial models around that when aggregated, those permissions look like in you're a banker by training. It starts to look like some sort of interesting forward, like contract that you could build models around and sort of sell as a security. I mentioned securitizing those assets, those permissions, if you like, and sort of having large finance come in, back up, and sort of refinance what are ultimately deals between, say, research labs and the individuals who are providing into these pools. So all of that
Yeah,
requires, I think, all of that provenance that you're talking about. Yeah.
I'm sort of intrigued as to, we put a lot of effort globally into open banking and open
Mm-hmm.
finance recently.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sort of surprised we haven't had a similar initiative in terms of open health data.
Yeah.
Because if you look at, the advantages in using artificial intelligence to mine health data from a basis of just even better diagnostics,
Mm-hmm.
the evidence is abundantly clear right now.
Yeah.
So why isn't it that we don't have open health initiatives?
Well, I think it's just because of what we just talked about. Like it's the most sensitive data that's out there. Like you don't like so what that means is that just reinforces the existing paradigm that this is something that a centralized entity has, and we have to be extremely strict about the usage of it. So, because what you're basically saying is, hey, don't worry about all those strict rules anymore. We've got a whole other way to protect that information, and now it's not about telling whichever health insurer or hospital that you've got this honey pot of data that you need to be incredibly restrictive of, but rather it's an open system. It's just that all the technology proves it. That I think is partly because we've gone so heavily into the rules, the HIPAA rules and others in the United States and
Right,
similar
right, right.
ones elsewhere, that say you can't let this data out. It means that it blows bureaucrats' minds when you say no, open the whole thing up. They say no, you can't do it, and they don't. It's very hard to have the conversation. I found
Yeah,
that with,
but I
with
mean,
these conversations about money laundering and banking and everything else
yeah,
as well. By the way.
there's obvious analogies to for using this data for better diagnostics and so forth. But the biggest problem countries like the United States have, the US in particular, is the massive increase in national healthcare costs that we've seen since the 1980s. And if you're going to try and reduce the cost of healthcare and you're looking at efficiency gains, you've got to be looking at the data. I mean, it would seem to me to be a fairly
Mm-hmm.
logical process. And if you're going
100%.
to do smart contracts
Yeah.
to automate as much of the healthcare system as possible, again, you're going to need open and data systems. So, but you're going to need this in every part of society. It doesn't really matter about the protected nature or the special
Yeah.
nature of health data. You could argue that company intellectual property or financial transactions, your bank balance is similarly should be protected, but you can't have protected data in an open AI system that's going to allow you benefits at scale. It's these two aspects of the system are sort of clashing. How do
Yeah.
we get policymakers
Hmm.
to to catch up with the rate of technological change that's possible here, that's going to produce all of these societal benefits, including massive resource efficiency gains and things like that?
Yeah, look, I think you need some sort of financial whales to emerge who have real interest in this in a way, because I think that's where policymakers tend to listen, and they can't listen to Facebook and Google and co and their interests, because they're not built around these models unless they are actually going to live up to what they say they're doing in terms of Web3. They're not. And so you need to find, whoever it is, is it the pharmaceutical companies? Maybe, but I tend to think that they're also incredibly invested in the incumbent model, which tends to be a closed system of research and sort of owning all of these high scale blockbuster drugs. Does Pfizer really want to have the system blown up when they can just make billions and billions of dollars in producing a COVID vaccine that's endorsed by the government, every year? So there's always this whole problem of the incumbents and whether or not they have an interest in this. And then if it doesn't have the same sort of immediate economic payoff. It's just you don't get them doing it. Now there should be folks who are just going to invent somewhere the most awesome treatment, and then they can take it to Brazil, and Brazil just suddenly uses out this whole tailored genetics treatment for various types of cancer or something, and the whole world then wants it, and this company is just going to be worth loads, and that will be the leverage with which you go somewhere. But it's chicken and egg in a way. So yeah, I mean, look, we need to be able to demonstrate this so that people will buy into it, both policymakers and investors, the power of this, rather than just talking about it. But that unfortunately, requires some unlocking of these barriers to be able to produce the proofs of concept, the pilots, whatever it is, to show that it works.
Yeah.
And I think this is all.
All right, so
yeah.
Let's because I know we're running out of time, but I want to give some attention to the book. I know it came out a little while ago, but Our Biggest Fight: Reclaiming Liberty, Humanity, and Dignity in the Digital Age. Where does the book fit into this? This problem set?
Yeah, like I feel like the book is setting the stage for what this decentralized AI conversation is all about, because the book was it was not exactly backward looking, but it was a snapshot in time that said, here's what's wrong with the web as we've created it, the internet that we were left with after the turn of the millennium, when we kind of defaulted to this data-driven social media web 2.0 concept, that we went away from this vision of the internet being a fully sort of open access, decentralized, everybody would be publishing to everybody and would all read it, to then a model, in fact, where it was no longer decentralized because you had the real gatekeepers being these gigantic corporations. The fact that Gmail is the default for every email now, the fact that Google and Facebook essentially own and control more than 50% of the world's digital advertising, right? So we created this incredibly monopolized environment around information, and all of the manipulative strategies that were tied to that are only now just being realized, with all the harm that that's done to people, their free will, the kids that have left suicided, the varieties of impacts that have come from algorithms that are deliberately designed to treat us, in the famous words of Bruce Schneier, as products and not customers,
right.
Mean that we created a very toxic system, and the way that Frank McCourt and I viewed it was through the lens of political science, that this is a form of feudalism. This is digital feudalism,
right.
And you can think of the platforms as an oligarchy, because it's not just about oligopoly. It's not just like financial control. It's literal control over our lives. This is our information system, whether we like it or not. The internet is the means by which we as a society process information and make decisions about things. And these systems are designed to keep us on the platforms engaged, because that's how you monetize it, through advertising and various other means, right? So that is why we argue, we are at 48% versus 48% on today, the very day we're having this interview, the probably arguably most important election in history. The whole country is divided. The algorithm, it is an outcome of these algorithms to create this division, to create these engagements. All of that's a pretty ugly dystopian state of affairs. Our point then is, and it's in the penultimate chapter of the book, is like, okay, look forward. What's happening? AI. Take that model and put it into AI, and it's taking all of that harmful impact of abuses of our data and ourselves. Our data is ourself. This is your personal being in the digital age. And it is pushing it into overdrive on steroids, whatever metaphor you want, in a world in which it's just being replicated. We do not want those systems to be owned by, Microsoft at OpenAI, Google, whomever, right? There's got to be a much more decentralized ownership of the data inputs, of the models, of the systems, than what we have had in Web 2. It's just, to me, so plainly obvious, and I don't know what I know. The book is all about trying to get people to basically wake up a little bit.
I mean,
and
I would. Are you familiar with Mike Pondsmith's work on cyberpunk?
I am. Yep.
And
Yep.
so, you've got this world of like all of these different types of internet systems that essentially emerge because of corporate controls or geographical things. I mean, we already have that to some extent. We have it with X right now. We
Hmm.
have it in the Chinese, with the Great Firewall in China and
Hmm.
so forth. So this thought of like a decentralized internet, it seems like we're getting further and further away from that right now.
No, I think we are, and that it is a problem. Like, I mean, at some point, and you're alluding to some of the sort of physical constraints that we have,
Right.
that I think are different from the sort of the corporate structure, and that will always. I don't, will it, maybe it won't always be there. Maybe Starlink or some competitor to Starlink becomes something. Maybe there's a.
Mm,
If you start to think about
right.
like what
Right.
public blockchains are, right, or tokenized models, they are collective ownership, right? And I think that's one of the most important things that we can bring to bear in this. And so the idea that we would have the future, a future in which this agentic future that we're talking about, where everybody owns their own
Agentic
AI
AI,
agents,
yes.
right? But how is that going to work in a centralized internet, like where
Yeah.
every single prompt is being pushed through one single pipe? You're never going to have the bandwidth to do it, so you're going to have to build edge compute. Well, edge compute itself may not be decentralized because one company might own all of the chips or own all the devices that run that. However, you can start to imagine a world in which it could be far more decentralized, where all the computation is happening in these localized environments. And as the token holders, I own that, and I pay for the services I'm getting with those tokens that I earn for providing the compute, providing the connectivity, et cetera, et cetera. And so there's a world in which I mean, you can see how it would emerge, that you could actually break down a lot of these silos and start to create something more collective, more decentralized and distributed. You're still going to have nation
We
states
got to
with the
take
guns in their
control
hands, and
back. Yeah, exactly.
it's hard. But look, I'm having a conversation on Thursday with Hernando de Soto, the brilliant Peruvian economist that I've known for many
Mm,
years,
yeah.
at the Proppy Summit, and he's going to talk about how establishing digital using blockchain models for property rights, and we were if we were to become really sophisticated on that, we could build these models of empowering human beings that make it very hard for nation states to actually come in and use their weapons to take control. So look, it's a very utopian way of thinking, but at the same time, you know innovation happens. Necessity is the mother of invention, right? And so if we're all going to end up in
When,
Skynet, then there's a
yeah.
necessity to do something. I figure we can
Oh, I
work it
hope
out.
we don't
Otherwise
end up
we
in
otherwise we're
Skynet, but
extinct.
yeah.
So come on, what are we going to do?
Yes, yes, absolutely. We talk about I mean that, but the same is true of capitalism in many ways, right? Unless we progress off and create new value systems, then we're going to extinct ourselves. What we always want to do at this part of the show is we want to get into where this might take us, and so we've already scenario planned that a little bit. We've done some game planning on this, but you know if you were to sort of see 20 years, 30 years in the future going out where agentic AI is everywhere and so forth, how do you see that mix between centralized systems and decentralized systems? And where are the best places or the best application of decentralized elements in the system versus these sort of larger control networks that we're seeing being built by OpenAI and, Google, Gemini, and others at the moment?
Yeah. So I think the trend that I would like to see happen is that we move to the world where intelligence itself is not this sort of monolithic thing that can be owned by one company, and it's going to answer all questions that you throw at it as if everything is right or wrong, right? This idea that an LLM is trying as best as it can to predict the next word and become the best thing. And it's like the idea is it's a race for each one of these things to become perfect, and it never will, because there is no perfect answer to everything, right? So I kind of think like what I want
It's
to,
building your own AI, right? It's
that's what
building your
I'm
own
saying. Yeah.
personalized AI,
That's right. So you want it to be like I want whatever it looks like, and there can be various models of this. And yes, it's decentralized, centralized, whatever it is. But I certainly want to be the world where I've got this friend who knows me and knows it and can go out into the world and get information for me incredibly efficiently, and then act on my behalf and do all those sorts of things. But is much more tailored to helping me make the decisions that I want to make in the world. And that it's that sort of subjectivity, that independence, that very human role, as opposed to I know nothing, just throwing a question at OpenAI and saying, "Hey, ChatGPT, give me the answer." And so that's sort of like if I think about that, I think, okay, where does it all then needs to be these provably, loyal, if you like, agents, right? It's got to be your dog that's never going to let you down. How do you prove that? Well, there's going to have to be a lot of technology around, proving the provenance of the data, the model it was built on, the ownership of it, the structures, the sort of integrity of the cryptography that protects your privacy. All those things need to be there, and we need people to understand that they can trust it because it has all of these features to it, right? So I think that we need to solve that, move in that direction. So I see a world where we've got this provably private and trustworthy agents acting on our behalf to enhance our own understanding and being in the world. That's, some people might see that as utopian, because at the end of the day, AGI is eventually just going to win, and we all just I don't know, subsume ourselves under its control.
No, but if we look at the industrial elements of AI, we're the biggest gains in terms of efficiency. So we talked about the healthcare system, but let's talk about supply chain automation, shipping, energy management, sanitation management, the flow of traffic in a city, how we're managing delivery of packages with automated systems and things like that. These systems aren't necessarily going to sit on classic cloud computing and things like that. They may need to be, built for purpose types of technologies in those. You're talking about property tech, and real estate records, for example. That would appear to be a much better fit for decentralized systems and consensus-based mechanisms than centralized control systems in the way we have. Yeah, you need some licensing authorities and things like that to stick on that, but the ability to add in new details about a digital twin on your property model and things like that's going to be a very dynamic thing. It would be very difficult for that to be a centralized system. So there would appear to be a massive need for consensus-based data mechanisms to build truly, broad enough AI that it's going to give the benefits to society meet the promise that we've held out for AI. At least that's my thinking.
Yes. And I mean, I thought this before the AI evolution, that really ultimately supply chains would become increasingly complex and fragmented, and the only way you could possibly manage them was through a consensus-based blockchain model. Again, it didn't happen a lot because I think that's actually not true. There is quite a lot of blockchain application now. It's one of those unsung stories because, this is also where there's a divergence, but it's worth noting that the conversation around crypto and blockchain has been so dominated by, all the negativity, the FTXs and the battles that going against it and so forth. There's the crypto bros and all that negative stuff that various mainstream companies that have embraced blockchain technology do not even want to talk about it because they don't want to be perceived as to. So there's this weird problem with that. But anyway, but even still, it hasn't been as far gone as I thought. And I do agree with you that those. There's so much we can't do. How are you going to build a smart city that's all run through one administration, one central player, telling where every single car has to go? No, you're going to have this level of understanding. Now, speaking of that, though, I think it's interesting. I had a conversation with somebody about the problems of SOPs, standard operating procedures, as they pertain to supply chains. And and I can see how this same problem would emerge across in a smart city, traffic moderation type of scenario as well, where each of the like procedures there's always some flaw in the document. There's always some error that doesn't make sense. And then when you multiply that across one company with multiple subsidiaries and then factories in different regions with different languages, but it's still one company, it gets even more complicated because each error is done in different ways. And then you apply that across a supply chain with multiple companies across multiple countries. All of those errors and inconsistencies are incredibly complicated. But you know what? It doesn't matter. The supply chains still work. Why? Because human beings intuitively understand and override those inconsistencies and kind of figure out how to make it all work. Because that's what humans do. We're able to actually contextualize information. However, you take that into an AI as they're currently built, and the whole thing would fall apart because it needs absolutely precise language. One bit, 1 0 that's not placed, one mistake, and you could send the whole thing awry, right? Yeah. So then, like, you're going to need AIs to actually clean up all the SOPs so that the AIs can run. So there's this very recursive aspect to what needs to be happening with AI right now. It's like, if we're going to use it in a world where supply chains and everything else happens, we have to actually bring them in and prepare the world for a future of AI. Like certain AIs building this future AI.
That's a good point for us to wrap. It's great for us to catch up again and have you on the show. Maybe we should try and get you do something about the intersection of Web3 and AI and the future, because I think it's something that particularly on the data ownership piece, we just really haven't done enough work on and need to continue to have this dialogue. But for those that are interested and listening and want to follow your efforts, particularly with your new setup, DAIS, and for the book, Our Biggest Fight, where can people keep in touch with what you're doing?
Yeah. So, I mean, the website DAIS.global is, you can find some information there about the Decentralized AI Society and what we're all about there. There's a mission statement and the like there. I can be followed on Twitter. Mike J. Casey is my Twitter handle. The Decentralized AI Society, DAIS as well. On LinkedIn has got some stuff. Then Our Biggest Fight, it's ourbiggestfight.com. You can there's quite a bit going there. That's being run by Project Liberty, which is Frank McCourt's not-for-profit that's driving this. And so they're using Our Biggest Fight really as the brand to make this case. And I can be, found in various other places on, the usual. Look me up, Michael John Casey on LinkedIn and Mike J. Casey on Twitter and the like.
And I'm really impressed you got a quote from Walter Isaacson on the cover of the book. Yeah. That's awesome, dude.
It was Frank's, you're a successful businessman like that, you build some of those relationships. But yeah, Isaacson was a good get. I thought you were going to say Bruce Springsteen. I was impressed with the Bruce Springsteen one.
Yeah, I thought that was cool too. But all right, well, listen, great to catch up, Michael, and let's stay in touch.
All right, thanks a lot, Brett.
That's it for this week on The Futurists. Join us again next week. If you like the show, give us a shout out on social media, give us a 5-star review, tell your friends about us, and also don't forget to tell us who you'd like to have on the show next. But that's it for this week, and of course, as per usual, we'll see you in the future.
Well, that's it for The Futurists this week. If you like the show, we sure hope you did. Please subscribe and share it with the people in your community. And don't forget to leave us a 5-star review. That really helps other people find the show. And you can ping us anytime on Instagram and Twitter at Futurist Podcast for the folks that you'd like to see on the show or the questions that you'd like us to ask. Thanks for joining. And as always, we'll see you in the future.